What does a relationship look like between a Type 3 achiever and a Type 4 individualist? Well, let's start off by talking about a few things they have in common. Most of the significant traits that 3s and 4s have in common can be tied to their place within the Heart Triad Center. Now, if you haven't heard of the Triad Centers before, then I would highly recommend watching my overview on the Triadic Self, either before you continue with this video or just after you finish it, because it's really going to help you conceptualize the way these types, and all types, navigate life. But for now, it's just important to know that all heart types are primarily influenced by their feelings, and specifically the way other people make them feel about themselves. So, emotions, relationships, and identity are all constantly driving this couple's interactions with not only each other, but with the outside world in general. Now, another trait that all heart types have in common is this tenuous relationship to their past, as it tends to carry a fair amount of shame or regret. However, 4s tend to wallow in or revisit their past on a regular basis in order to find meaning in it. Whereas 3s just want to move forward because focusing on future goals feels way better than thinking about their past mistakes. Essentially, 3s and 4s are a bit like Germany and France, in that they're right next to each other, but one is way more overtly emotional and willing to romanticize their past, whereas the other is like, hey, things have been pretty good since the late 80s, so can we just focus on the fact that we make the best cars, beers, and sausages in the world? Am I right? Alright, speaking of geographical connections, another place that 3s and 4s meet is at the sweet little Belgian waffle that is the Type 2 helper. Although, when 4s go to 2, it's typically in one of their less than sweet moments, as that's their movement of disintegration. 3s, on the other hand, can have a 2 wing, which makes them even more upbeat, socially savvy, and a bit more family-oriented than career-oriented, generally speaking. Now, the way this connection plays out as a shared trait is often in a mutual desire to feel important in the lives of others, which can either come from a place of inspirational empathy or insecure attachment. But more on that later. Alright, the last and most obvious point of connection for 3s and 4s is the fact that they're each other's wing. So 3s can have a 4 wing, aka the professional, and 4s can have a 3 wing, aka the aristocrat. Now, both of these subtypes are incredibly complex, as they both feel a desire to move outward in search of a more performative role, as well as a desire to move inward in search of a more emotionally authentic identity. This often produces a pairing with a rather elegant style, or at least the ability to stand out from the crowd, as they bring a mixture of social ambition and creative elitism that makes them very concerned with the quality of their connections, creations, and/or material possessions. At the end of the day, though, and no matter what their wing is, 3s and 4s create wonderfully nuanced relationships with each other, as they bond over their pursuit of a meaningful platform through which they can manifest their greatest gifts. And ultimately, they remind us that success and self-expression aren't at odds, but rather two sides of the same heart-shaped coin. Alright, before I start writing poetry, let's shift gears and talk about a few things that 3s find uniquely attractive about 4s, and vice versa. In my opinion, the best way to describe the 3's attraction to the 4 is wabi-sabi. Wabi-sabi is the Japanese concept of finding beauty in the flaws, imperfection, or impermanence of things, as wabi means something like less is more, and sabi means something like serene melancholy. Now, the reason this can be such a profound point of attraction for 3s is because their greatest fear is of losing their successful image, as it's how they attract the affirming attention their ego craves. This fear can often make 3s desperate to hide any flaws in their physical appearance, gaps in their knowledge or skills, and of course, any past mistakes or relational indiscretion. Healthy 4s, however, are masters at finding the beautiful amidst the broken. So when the 3 eventually lets them in, they find the 4 brings an unflinching source of empathy and support, where the 3's vulnerability is far more praiseworthy than their capability. Interestingly enough, though, most 3s find that it takes going through something truly heartbreaking or image-shattering before they really learn to value the 4's perspective in their life. Because until then, it simply feels unproductive or inefficient to look behind the curtain of their perfectly polished public persona. Thankfully, 4s are far less concerned with productivity than they are with authenticity, which means they're great at helping the 3s sit with their emotions long enough to actually process and accept them, rather than just flinging them back behind the curtain and getting back on stage. Speaking of performing, fours with a strong 5 wing are often far less concerned with public approval, as the 5 represents this desire for intellectual integrity that produces an even stronger attachment to their own internal sense of what has beauty and meaning. A strong 5 wing also makes the 4 even less afraid of diving into dark or melancholy inducing subject matter, as that's often where they find the greatest inspiration for their works of art. As you can imagine, this perspective can be quite transformative for a 3, who realizes that all the painful gunk inside their heart can be used not only to become someone genuinely beautiful, but to create something genuinely beautiful as well. Alright, I know there's a ton of other little things that 3s can love about 4s as well, like their sense of humor and all their unfiltered opinions and so on, but I just wanted to focus on this one unique aspect of attraction because I've seen it in my own personal life, and I think it is very, very special. Okay, on that note, let's switch it on over to what 4s often find most attractive about 3s. Fours are often attracted to 3s for the exact opposite reason that 3s are attracted to 4s. So, if the 4 helps the 3 to embrace their emotions as an integral part of their identity, then the 3 helps the 4 avoid wrapping their entire identity around their emotions. Much of this can be tied back to the triad centers I mentioned earlier, as 3s are the impinged type of the heart center, which means they've learned to compartmentalize their emotions, and instead, they live from this mixture of head center logic and gut center action. Obviously, that has its pros and cons, but in general, this makes 3s highly pragmatic people who know how to keep their eye on the prize even in the face of some deeply emotional experiences. 4s, on the other hand, take even the faintest emotion upstairs to their head center, where they can then amplify it, distort it, or use it to spend hours imagining they're a totally different person with a totally different life. This in turn leads many 4s to neglect the physical activity and practical instincts of their gut or body center. And now we're back to why 3s are such an attractive and motivational spark in the 4's life, as the fellow heart center 3 is great at acknowledging the value of the 4's feelings, while also using their charismatic encouragement to refocus the 4's energy on what they can realistically accomplish today. This is a similar point of attraction for 4s in relationships with 1s or 8s, but whereas those types bring a far more critical or intense push to productivity, the 3 is typically masterful when it comes to using positive reinforcement to inspire others to take action. With that said, 3s tend to be relationally aware enough to back off when their motivational presence is either not working or is just unwelcome, which, given the 4's desire to just brood sometimes, is often the case. In these moments, the 4 is grateful to have such an independent partner who doesn't feel the need to encroach upon their personal space or their repeated attempts to find themselves. And in fact, 3s are often more than happy to give the 4 oodles of alone time, as they've always got a long to-do list of personal projects or social events they'd like to attend. Ironically, this welcome time apart from each other tends to reignite the ever-romantic 4's attraction to the 3. Basically, the whole absence makes the heart grow fonder thing. So, when the 3 finally returns home to the 4, they've often never looked better. Alright, now that we've talked about more than a few things that can bring 3s and 4s together, it's time to talk about a few things that can pull them apart. Hey there, friend. Looks like you're a little more than halfway through this Enneagram relationship episode, which means it's a great time to not only watch this fancy little neon graphic float off into the distance, but to hit those like and subscribe buttons, you know? You know what I mean? You know those buttons that are sitting right there? Don't be coy, you know where they are. You know, if you're feeling non-committal, you can just hit the like button. It's still really helpful. Okay, let's get back to it. Conflict between 3s and 4s pretty much comes down to this question of how should we deal with our emotions? And based on everything we've discussed so far, it probably won't surprise you to hear that 3s and 4s come up with drastically different answers. The average 3 treats their emotions a bit like a landmine that they hope they don't step on as they race towards their goals, while the average 4 treats their emotions like an anchor that can either keep them grounded or drag them to the bottom of the ocean. So this relationship can often become a clash of speed versus depth, efficiency versus empathy, and avoidance versus indulgence. Now, there are several key Enneagram theories that can help explain where these differences come from and how they create patterns of conflict between 3s and 4s. The first of which being the Hornevian triad. The Hornevian triad describes the general way each Enneagram type gets what they want from social or relational situations. And since 3s and 4s are both within the heart triad center, they typically want love, praise, and affirmation more than anything else. However, threes, as assertive types within the Hornevian triad, prefer to assert their presence in order to win the love they desire, while fours, as withdrawn types, prefer to withdraw their presence in order to find out who loves them enough to pursue them. Now, there's nothing inherently better or worse about either of these preferences, but the problem that occurs in this relationship is that as tension rises, the four withdraws into isolation, hoping that the three will come after them. But the three has already moved on to some more affirming environment at work or with friends. This not only creates a vast physical distance between the three and the four, but also a vast emotional distance, thanks to this mutual sense of rejection they both feel from each other. And this is where the harmonic triad comes into play, as it's all about the way Enneagram types cope with painful situations. Here you'll see that threes are competency types, while fours are reactive types. So as intimacy fades and conflict grows, the three searches for practical solutions that can reestablish their identity as a capable and praiseworthy individual. The four, on the other hand, starts making increasingly unfiltered statements regarding their doubts about the relationship or the three's inauthentic behavior. Sadly, all this does is make the three even more skittish, as they start to feel like there is no practical solution to the four's emotional problems. And threes, by nature, don't participate in things that have a high likelihood of failure. So while the four is just looking for a genuine dialogue about the issues that are plaguing their relationship, they often wind up painting such a hopeless picture of their future together that the three takes it as their cue to run off to a more affirming or image-enhancing relationship. Ultimately, the big red flag for this couple is when a growing social distance becomes a source of deep animosity, as the four feels like the three is concerned with the praise and admiration of everyone but the four, while the three feels like the four is just using their emotions as an excuse to avoid the hustle that's required to build a truly successful life. Okay, that's enough about conflict for now, and since I don't like to end these episodes with a bleak portrait of a relationship gone wrong, let's dive into just a little relationship advice that should help the 3-4 couples have a much healthier future together. The first tip I have for the 3-4 couple is to notice when you're slipping into comparison mode. For threes, you tend to compare yourself with other high performers in your social or professional circles, which then motivates you to work harder and move faster in order to stay ahead. This also prevents you threes from talking about any of your weaknesses or things you may be dealing with, because then you won't look like such a high performer after all. The problem with this is that fours naturally disregard people who seem to have an overly charmed life, or who can't embrace the full depth and darkness of our human emotions. So I would just caution you threes to avoid constantly giving the four your highlight reel without also giving them some of your lowlights as well. This will also prevent your desire to stand out from turning into a desire to stand away from people like the four, whose passion for authenticity makes you question your entire LinkedIn profile. Now, you fours, on the other hand, have quite a different issue when it comes to comparing yourself to others, in that you tend to look at high-performing individuals like the three and feel like they just have something you lack, or like you're inherently not as functional as they are. This in turn leads you to withhold your encouragement or affirmation from the three, because you feel like, they're fine. They get tons of praise from people who matter way more than I do. Sadly, even though this perspective is coming from a self-deprecating place, it still triggers the three's sense of shame, as they feel like there's nothing they can do to earn your praise. So, I would highly recommend that you fours make it a habit to regularly express the things you see and love most about the three. Not only to keep yourself from feeling like your words don't matter, but to also help the three feel like they matter more than your negative feelings do. Okay, the next tip I have for this couple is to schedule a nightly check-in with each other. Although you should definitely call it something better than a check-in, like perhaps a pillow powwow or a snuggle summit. Whatever you decide to call it, you just got to bring 2 things with you: a post-it note and a journal. The post-it note is for the 4, who needs to think of 2 or 3 things they have to or want to get done the next day. And the journal is for the 3, who needs to write a full page about how they felt the past 24 hours. Now, once the 4 has their to-do list and the 3 has their journal entry, then it's time to share. This will essentially put the 4 in the 3's world of practical goal setting, and the 3 in the 4's world of emotional introspection, which over the long run will benefit this couple not only on an individual level, but on a relational level as well. All right, that leads us to my last piece of advice for the 3-4 couple, which is to make shared experiences a top priority. The reason this is so important is because 3s often get lost in their pragmatic world, full of social commitments and exciting career opportunities, while 4s often get lost in their imaginative world, full of creative ideas and wild fantasies. So in a relationship, this couple can lose touch with each other if they're not intentional about co-creating meaningful experiences together that help the 3 slow down and savor the moment, and help the 4 stay grounded in the beauty of their real, rather than imagined, life. Personally, I'd recommend traveling together at least once or twice a year, because the quality time you get when mixed with the memories you make really has a unique way of reestablishing both a sense of presence and intimacy, no matter what all else you got going on in your life. But hey, if now is not the time for travel, then there's always museums, concerts, comedy shows, and the good old-fashioned sunrise hike to help bring you back to the beauty of the life you share together. All right, speaking of having a beautiful experience together, it's time to wind things down as we always do with the patented YGAT relationship rating system. First up on the YGAT relationship rating system is the spice meter. And the overtly passionate 4 can definitely pull the 3 out of their professional composure and into some rather heated moments, be they romantic or just dramatic, especially if the 3 has a strong forewing. So let's put them just past the halfway point at a 6 out of 10. Next up is the power meter. And this can be a surprisingly glamorous couple, especially if the 4 has a strong 3 wing, as this pairing will bring a mixture of creativity, productivity, and concern with their social status. However, since 4s with a 5 wing are one of the Enneagram types that struggle the most with turning their brilliant ideas into practical actions, I'm going to bring this couple back towards the peaceful side of things to about a 6 out of 10. Although they could definitely go much higher. All right, that leaves us with the fun meter. And this is a tough one, because this couple can enjoy everything from buttoned-up black tie galas to going out for burgers after the gala is over and having existential conversations late into the night. So for that reason, I'm going to give them a versatile and rather unpredictable 7 out of 10. All right, folks, there you have it, the Enneagram 3-4 relationship. A duo that is passionate, prominent, and about as much fun as turbulence on a first-class flight. You're still having a great time, but also your life just kind of flashed before your eyes. That's a wrap on this Enneagram relationship episode for the Type 3 Achiever with a Type 4 Individualist. If you're shutting it down here, then I will say thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, then please do me a tiny little favor and hit those like and subscribe buttons for me on your way out, if you wouldn't mind. But hey, if you're sticking around for more Enneagram goodness, then you know I've got plenty of relationship-themed content for you to choose from right here on the screen, as well as some more lighthearted content if you need a break. Take your pick.